Welcome to Born to Be Barefoot. I'm your host, Stuart Gordon, with my co-host, Katie Tsuyuki.
Hello, everyone. Katie Tsuyuki here, and this is the Born to Be Barefoot podcast, powered by Barefoot Science insoles. And today I have an amazing person, co-host, Englishman, coming from the UK. This is Stuart Gordon. Stuart, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you, Katie. It's great to talk to you. Very excited about this whole podcast thing. It's I've only ever done one as a presenter before. I've been a guest on a couple over here in the UK, so this is going to be good fun.
Yes, I too have. This is my first podcast, getting to be a host. So exciting. But Stuart, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, how are you, and why do you think we chose you to be involved with the Born to Be Barefoot podcast?
Well, my job, I'm a sports therapist here in the UK, which means I'm treating people with a whole variety of sports injuries, and not just sports injuries. Funnily enough, it's everybody from all walks of life with the aches and pains. The relevance of treating them as sports injuries is pretty much the same. I've been doing it for 30 years. And many years ago, I trained to assess for biomechanical assessment and for the fitting of orthotics. And I did that for a number of years, but kind of slowly fell out of love with orthotics because for me, they weren't providing a long-term solution. They weren't fixing the problem as such. They were propping the foot up, supporting it, and it provided some benefits. You know, that would be absolutely wrong for me to say anything other than that. But then I got introduced by the company I was buying the orthotics from, actually, to a product called Barefoot Science insoles, which I thought made complete and utter sense to my way of looking at movement and injury prevention and injury recovery. So I started to offer them to a few of my clients and had some great success. Prior to that, as always, with anything new, I try them myself. And I had a particular problem. Had lots of problems from my sporting background, but this specific one was to do with the big toe on my left foot, something called hallux rigidus, which was absolute flipping agony every time I went walking. So I tried the insoles, and astonishingly, they helped. And there was a process through that. So I started to promote them more. And then about 3.5 years ago, an opportunity cropped up for me to become the UK distributor. So I had a number of long chats with the CEO of the company, Barefoot Science, a chap called Lance Todd. And he's a force of nature, Lance, once he gets going. And I love the way that they want to present the product. It has some fantastic benefits in a whole range of different applications. And I thought, yeah, this is something I want to get involved with. And that's what I've been doing. And they obviously like the way I go about doing it because they've asked me to host this podcast. So I'm absolutely delighted. Yeah.
Oh, great. That sounds like you have some years of experience, definitely in the sports world and treating people. But who do you think is the most famous person who all of us kind of normal people might not in the sporting world would know? Who's the most famous person you've treated?
Oh, gosh, right. Well, it depends how old you are, really. So I treated years and years and years ago, very early in my career, I had the pleasure of treating a chap called Alan Wells, who was a double Olympic gold medalist in Moscow in the 100 and 200. And at the time I got to treat him, he'd retired from sprinting and was in the British bobsleigh team as one of the super fast, strong people pushing the thing to get the fast shoot off down the bobsleigh run. So he was a really interesting character. Obviously a fantastic athletic career. I've treated gold medal winning horse riders. A lady from Spain, she'd been, I think, a silver in the Worlds. Tour golfers, Ryder Cup players. But just as important as that, I've treated, Mrs. Sproggins from down the road who had a bad knee and couldn't get out and walk the dog or whatever it might be. And it's equally rewarding, to help somebody achieve their goals. We talk a lot about optimal performance, but optimal performance for an athlete in your category, or as I say, an Olympic sprinter or whatever, is obvious. They want to be able to perform that event as efficiently as possible. but optimal performance for somebody just starting a couch to 5K. If they started it and they're getting a problem with their knee or their ankle or whatever it might be, they're not going to achieve their optimal performance. So it's just as important for them. And that's what I love doing, is helping people. And as a therapist I work predominantly one-to-one. I've coached a lot of sporting groups, but as a therapist, coaching one-to-one, treating one-to-one. And then when the insoles, that gave me the opportunity to spread the love and, try and help more than one person at one time. So that was the first time I was able to do that. I felt confident enough of a product to want to do that and get it out there. So, but oh God, thousands and thousands of people from all over the world beat a path to my doorstep occasionally. So that's great fun.
Now, you obviously have a love of sport. Why don't you tell me where that love of sport came from? Like, what did you play when you were kind of a few years ago?
Yeah, well, I was incredibly lucky. I've got a brother and a sister, and we grew up with constantly playing sport. Our dad was a physical training instructor in the Air Force when he did his national service here, and an absolute lover of sport and movement. And we grew up running around the garden barefoot, doing cartwheels, doing handsprings, doing gymnastic stuff, playing football, any sport and every sport that was an opportunity to play on the beach on holiday or in the back garden, we played. I was one of those people who was lucky enough to be able to play quite a lot of different sports to a reasonable standard. Football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, was my main sport for the winter. And I was lucky enough to get signed up for a professional club over here in the UK as a youth, and played through the youth and the reserve systems. Now, while I was doing that, I was what we have in the UK, we've got counties that make up the different areas, and I was a county athlete in sprinting and long jump, and I played basketball at county level and a lot of other sports. But unfortunately, my body failed me, Katie. I'm over it now. At least my therapist says I am. I'm not convinced, but my body started to fail me. I probably, with hindsight, did, I think, a little bit too much too young. And this is one of my little soapboxes when I see a lot of youngsters, is to try and make sure they're not overplaying one particular sport, that they're varying what they do a little bit, and not creating the potential for overuse injuries as they're growing. Their growth plates are still developing. Because I think that's where my problem, I started to get groin and hip problems in my late teens. I carried on played it, as I said, at senior level. But I could never maintain my fitness. And so I gradually sort of had to pull back from playing at the standard I would like to have played. I then went and trained at college. I studied physical education, and then I studied sports coaching and worked in that industry. I worked in a squash club. I worked on what's called a holiday and country club, coaching a whole variety of different sports, from trampolining through to clay pigeon shooting and archery, through to cricket and tennis and football. So I just had this fantastic opportunity to get involved in so many different activities and sports. And that, possibly more than anything, has held me in good stead for what I do, because I have this ability to understand how a golfer is moving, how a rugby player or a tennis player is moving, gymnasts. And I treated a young lady years and years ago. She was in the British synchronized swimming team. And again, I hadn't done synchronized swimming, but I'd trained in gymnastics and trampolining. So some of them, that broad spread of sport just has, I believe, has given me a wonderful life, but also has stood me in good stead for understanding other people's movement problems and helping them recover. There you go.
Wow, it definitely looks like you have a keen eye for movement. You've been watching it and being involved for a really long time.
Yeah.
But our friend Lance Todd has a little saying, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. And how do you feel about that statement there, Stuart?
Yeah, it's a fascinating statement. So as somebody assessing biomechanical movement, there were some simple checks that we could do with somebody lying face down on a table, watching them on a treadmill, watching them walking, live up the pathway or whatever. And that's what I've been doing for years, and I felt I was pretty good at it. But then, having got involved with the Barefoot Science insoles, I was invited over to New York State to visit a guy who developed this system using a product called Optigate. It's actually an Italian product, but this chap in America looked at it and said, well, look, it's great that we're telling people what's wrong with their gait and their movement through the gait cycle and walking and running. But it's not enough just to tell them what's wrong. We need to provide them with a solution. And so he then started to look at the use of this product differently, and he wanted things that would make a difference to help improve somebody's movement. And he assessed lots of things like orthotics and different trainers. And he found that actually in an awful lot of cases, the data that he was producing was completely contrary to what you would think when you were eyeballing it, when you were looking at it. And this is where this assessing or guessing thing comes up, because using Optigate, which I now do, there is no guessing. You're looking at hard data, measured outcomes, and you can get a very, very precise, down to the nearest millisecond on contact time when somebody's running the touch and go, and see whether their left side is different to their right side. And again, this chap said, look, there's no point, if you took a standard trainer off the shelf, it can't be designed for just one person. And we don't know whether that one person is as well balanced, as moving as equally as well on their left foot or left leg and left foot as they are on their right leg and right foot. So we need to assess them properly. We need to actually get that data. And that's transformed my treatments, because not only can you use this high-tech equipment to measure data, you can tie it up with whether there's something coming from their neck or their pelvis. There might be hip flexors, the hamstrings might be showing a problem. That will reflect in the data. So you can cross-reference against some very simple checks and some work that a chiropractor might do, or me as a sports therapist might do. It'll guide you to trying to release tension in the hamstring or tension in the hip flexor. And then you can recheck to see whether what you've just done has worked. Again, no guessing, not just how does it feel? It feels great. Does it stack up with the data? And, I think some of the guests that I'm hoping we're going to get on, and I'm hoping that guy we're going to get on is a chap called Peter Gorman. And there's a great exponent who I know, Scott Griswood up in Canada. Scott's brilliant at this. I've learned a lot from him with that system. And we'll hear what those guys have got to say about it, because they've been using it a lot longer than I have, and I'm learning from them as we go along. But it's, stop guessing, start assessing. That's an absolute crunch point for me. Yeah, good question.
Right. So evolution in how we see things with movement, right? Being able to get a totally objective perspective on even just your gait cycle, like how people are walking. If what they look like shod, what they look like in bare feet. Why don't you talk about some of the differences like that? Like, what do you see normally when you see people like shod it or in shoe, and then they go in the barefoot? Like what, on the system that you use?
Yeah. So the protocol that we use is we assess somebody barefoot, and it takes 1 minute to do each of these assessments. So we get them walking on the treadmill barefoot, and it produces a set of data that tells us about their step length, their single leg stance, or the balance phases in single leg stance and swing phase. But there's two really important ones, which is loading response or load response and pre-swing. So that's the landing. It measures how well and efficiently the foot is landing and how efficiently it's moving off. As I say, we compare everything left to right. So we test them barefoot, and then we stick them in 2-3 different pairs of shoes and retest them and just look at the differences. We can compare and see, A, whether the shoes that they're wearing are making things better or worse. And then B, whether one particular pair of shoes is good or bad for that person. I had a great example of this, a wonderful guy, and I'm going to ask him actually to be a guest on the podcast. He's a phenomenal character. He's 16 years ago, he had his skull crushed by a lorry reversing into him, and not deliberately.
Oh my gosh.
The lorry driver didn't see him. He was behind it doing something. It just absolutely crushed his skull. He was in a coma, massive problems, brain damage. Phenomenal. And I met his wife. His wife heard me speaking at a podiatry conference here in the UK, and she approached me afterwards and she said, "Do you think that this stuff would help with brain damage?" And I said, "Well, maybe. There's only one way to find out." And so they came across from a place called Southend-on-Sea in Essex, across to see me, and tested him barefoot, tested him in the trainers he wears every day. He walks the dog. He's got a personal trainer who's been working with him for all that period of time. He's done a fantastic job. He sees a physio fairly regularly. So he's out there walking. And one of the reasons that they wanted him to come and see me particularly was that his wife had just entered him in for a 10K run. So this guy was entered in for a 10K run, and he ran with a stick. That was at the time, that's the only way he could run. So, as I say, we went through the 3 different pairs of shoes that he had, or 2 different pairs of shoes he had. The barefoot, the trainers that he wears all the time, and then a relatively new pair that he bought for running. And barefoot data, we're looking for all of the parameters of the gait cycle to be below 5%. That's 5% difference between left and right as a maximum, and then 5% difference in the amount of energy that you're using to actually create that movement pattern. So we want to be efficient, and the more energy you're using, the less efficient you're being. So this guy's figures were off the board. I mean, everything was up around the 40 and the 50% barefoot. The only thing that wasn't fun enough was his step length. Step length was really good, but then that was because he could only shuffle. He couldn't take long steps, and he was taking very small, short steps, and they were even short steps, but it didn't make for very efficient walking. His efficiency levels were terrible. So put him in his trainers, everyday wear trainers, and we did the same test. And I asked him, before I gave him the comparison results, I asked him whether he thought the trainers were better than the barefoot. And he said, no, I really liked the barefoot. He said, I felt great contact and really felt that connection. So I said, okay. So then we looked at the figures, and his barefoot figures were worse than his trainer figures, but both of them were terrible. So the impression he was getting of the benefit of walking barefoot actually was completely false. So then we put him in this new pair of trainers that he'd bought for the running, and actually they were better. Of the 3 tests that we did, they were better, but we were still up in double figures for everything. So, and I say double figures, 20s and 30s percentage of inefficiencies and asymmetry. So then I did this follow-up system that was devised by Dr. Gorman, the Optigate inventor, which is called biofeedback training, or the second screen, as he calls it. And that's where the participant sees a couple of blocks on a TV monitor in front of them, which represent what's happening on the left and the right side. And we started to train him. And of course, that information is coming in through his eyes. Now, bearing in mind, this guy has double vision, and it's up and down double vision, not side to side double vision. So he's seeing the screen in front of him. That information is going to his brain damaged brain, has to process that, make some sense of it, and tell his body what to do. We did that. Sorry, beg your pardon. I go back a stage. Then I'd put the insoles in and retested him after doing the barefoot and the 2 trainers. Then put the insoles in the running trainers, the best ones, and the results came down into the low teens, and in 1 or 2 areas below 10%. So the turnaround with Barefoot Science insoles, and just on level 1 of 7 plug levels, insert levels of stimulation, was remarkable. And then we did the second screen, the brain training and biofeedback. And the results were astonishing. I'm going to put together a blog and a video story about this guy, because I was just overwhelmed, quite frankly, with his attitude and his demeanor, and his wife. They're a wonderful pair who just laughed and joked their way through life. That was their way of coping with this whole thing. I'm sure they've had some pretty horrendous times as well, but their strength of character between them was phenomenal. And the gait improvement was equally phenomenal. And, this is why people like me and Scott and other people do this job. I got an email that evening from them saying that he went away motivated and inspired. And I just wrote back and I said, well, I'm delighted that you're motivated. I said, inspiration, if it goes one way, it goes both ways. I came out of that session, I was on cloud 9. I just couldn't believe how that guy had adapted and his positive attitude, and he was going to go back and start training with a new improved vengeance. So I'm going to get him back actually soon and retest him, because as somebody progresses through this system, we want to make sure that those progressions are positive, because when you're changing the neural stimulus to the brain, in any case, in any instance, there's going to be positive, and sometimes it can have negative benefits to start off with. They have to be trained, hence that second screen, to cope with that new information. And of course, in this guy's case, anything going up to his brain has got extra challenges. But that was astonishing. And whether it's him or whether it's a 7-year-old kid you're taking through it who's got problems at school and problems of low self-esteem because they can't run, they just want to run with their mates and their feet are all over the place and they're tripping over. And we get them going and we go through that system and put the insoles in and get them trained better, and they can run. That's just a wonderful pleasure. And interesting, actually, I'm going to touch on that quickly. Just these Canadians have got some good ideas, because I'm going back 27, 28 years. I had a client come to see me who was one of the first people in the UK to train in something called sensory processing or sensory integration therapy, which was devised by a Canadian lady called Jean Ayres, an occupational therapist. And through that, I was opened up to this issue of how our body receives information through what we feel, proprioception, which is what the insoles are all about, but also what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste. And it was a fascinating experience. I then worked with her, and she sent a lot of these kids to me to do some of the physical work. And I wish then that I'd had the Optigate system available to me and the insoles available to me, because I know from what I'm doing now the difference it would have made to that. And she's retired, but I've got a couple of other occupational therapists here who send young children to me for these assessments and the corrections. And again, the joy of seeing kids feeling better about life and better about themselves is wonderful. Had it with my own son, and I'm now looking at my granddaughters. I've got 2 granddaughters, they're 3 and 7. And I've got to tell you, just from the sporting background, I celebrated my 60th birthday, not this year, last year. And I'm going to try and do this every year, which is to do cartwheels in the garden with my grandchildren. The 7-year-old nailed it. I nailed it. The 7-year-old nailed it. The 3-year-old, not quite. But we're work in progress. So that's my aim. I'm still doing that when they get into their young teens. I'll be happy. So there we go.
I actually listened to this podcast. It was one of them off of Gaia, and they had this one guy who was on. He was a doctor, and his whole thing was rolling on the ground to cure ailments, like arms up, get on a hard surface, roll and just keep on rolling. And he had some amazing work with also like damaged people and older women who couldn't get out of their chair, but they could could just get out of their chair to get on the floor to start rolling, and how they it started off with just like one flip and then more and more and more. But it was that's pretty interesting, dude.
Is that sensory integration, sensory processing?
Yeah,
it's the stuff they do. That's one of the treatments. With my youngest son, he won't mind me saying this. He's happy for me to use him as an example. He's a crazy snowboarding, wakeboarding case like you now. Not quite on your level, it has to be said, but he spends his winters snowboarding and his summers wakeboarding. But we had to get him doing all of that sort of stuff before going out and playing football. I had him doing rolling over sideways one way, rolling over sideways the other way, spinning on the spot 3 times, spinning on the spot 3 times the other way, catching a football down on the floor, crawling. All of this sort of stuff stimulates the part of the brain called the vestibular. It's in the inner ear. And again, that's very much to do with balance and coordination and processing of information. And if we did that with him, he could go out and give a sort of a reasonable performance on a football pitch, a soccer pitch. If he didn't, he would be completely lost, had no idea of where he was in space relative to the ball or the team, his teammates or the opposition. So this stuff, spinning, vestibular training, I've seen one place where they have like a spinning pole with a board on the bottom. Somebody sits on it and they spin them around madly fast. I mean, you'd think it's like the worst fairground ride that you could imagine, spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And you think they're either going to throw up or fall over when they get off, but they don't. They get off and stand. They go, oh, hey. And suddenly their whole demeanor changes, their behavior changes, their ability to cope with stuff at school or at home changes. And it's phenomenal how that sort of therapy has evolved. There's a guy in the Czech Republic who takes people right the way back to being a baby. Now, you've just had I don't know, how old's your son now?
2.
So you've seen him go through the process of lying on his back and then learning to turn over and lie on his front.
Oh, yeah. I think I heard about this guy.
Yeah. So when your baby turns over to lie on the front, they have to lift their head up a little bit, which starts to create that natural curve in the back of your spine, which also then creates a natural curve in the bottom of the spine. And then after a while, they push themselves up. So they're using their arms and their hands, and they learn to flex the wrists back to get the pushing up, and they develop strength in their shoulders and their elbows. And then they get their knees up underneath them, so their hip muscles start to work, and then they crawl. But we want them to cross crawl. So it'd be opposite arm and opposite leg going forward. And you get some kids who don't. They crawl same arm, same leg. That's a clue that they're potentially going to have some problems in later life, or later in their childhood as well. So he takes adults back and gets them through that process and makes them learn to roll over, learn to push themselves up, learn to crawl, learn to then pull themselves up on a chair or a table to standing position, and so on. And a really good friend of mine trained in that, guy over in Prague. And I've watched him. I've seen some video. He's got 2 little girls now, and he took them through this. They were perfect case studies of. I'm not sure they needed any, because he and his wife were world level Latin American dancers, and his wife was the world sport pole dancing champion. And he's a Pilates instructor and instructor's instructor. So pretty well coordinated couple, those two. So I'm pretty sure they produce super babies. But it's it's actually, it'd be a good guest to have on, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Why have I never thought of that? Okay, Stefan, I'm coming after you. So I've just been opened up to all sorts of fascinating areas, and you're a bit of a sponge. I know I've listened to you and spoken with you, and you just absorbed stuff that you've learned through your own experiences, and that's what I've done through life. And you store them away, and then they pop up at some point, and you think this is going to be really useful. I remember that from however many years ago, and apply it. And that's how I work with people. You sort of don't have one set formula. We've got a guy coming on, one of our podcast guests. He's a chap called Urson Religioso, who's a physical therapist in the States. Now, he coined a phrase which I love, actually, and I'm going to quiz him about this, but he calls it the eclectic method. And I'm hoping that's what I think it means, which is he's just combined a whole range of different systems into whatever suits the person you're working on. It has, it has to be appropriate to that individual. And so he's going to be a good one to have a chat with. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to get started.
You talk about all your clients and everything. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your clinic? Where are you?
I'm in a
building.
Do I have a building? No. Yes, I have a building, but it's only a small building. So I live in a place called Liphook in Hampshire, England, which is we're about an hour and a bit south of London, and about a half an hour north of the south coast. Is a town city called Portsmouth, very famous naval town. So we're sort of in between those two, very surrounded by beautiful countryside. And so I have what was a former car garage, which I converted into a little treatment clinic, and that's where I've got my treatment table and my Optigate system and treadmill and a few other bits and pieces. And I've always had a presence in a town about 20 minutes up the road, nearer to Guildford. It's called Guildford. It's a bigger town. Where I live is a relatively sort of smallish, a village. So I've been in Guildford for both of those places now for nearly 30 years. And I never advertised. Just built up by word of mouth, and thankfully I must have been doing something right, because people still come and see me, and still get lots of lovely, interesting people coming along. So we called ourselves Hands On to Health. My wife is a Pilates teacher. She's been teaching Pilates for over 20 years, and for 15 years before that was a gym instructor working in big bodybuilding and weight training and powerlifting gyms, treating training people in that way. So we're pretty
do you have the garage and you got like your Optigate system, treadmill, blah blah, and then does she have like the living room and she's got like the Cadillac and the bed and the barrels, and
sadly not. We've never got around to doing the whole studio thing. Or my wife worked in a Pilates studio and learned all of that stuff again, going back about 25 years ago, and loves it. But it just didn't suit our particular circumstances. You know, Katie, you're on child number one. Between us, we've got 5. Not youngsters anymore. They range from 27 up to 40, but it was pretty hectic. And, you know, life is what it is, and you deal with what the cards you dealt. And she teaches in classes around and locally. And of course, for her, Zoom changed everything. Lockdown changed everything, and Zoom became the way to go. Zoomilates. And of course, people love it, actually. So she does a lot of her classes on Zoom now. Does some one-to-ones in the treatment room at times as well. We've got a reformer that she can set up in there if she needs to. So yeah, we're in that world.
Yeah, that sounds like you guys are well entrenched in sport and movement for a very long time, both of you.
Yeah, it's great.
Really
I fix them, then I send them to her for Pilates, and she just pushes them a little bit to break them again, so they have to come back and see me, and then I fix them and I send them back. Nobody's rumbled us yet. It's great. No, it's a good combo.
I see on Barefoot Science social media a lot of the stuff about The Rock. Why don't you tell us a little bit about The Rock? And
so I came across an event called The Rock. It's a triathlon with a bit of a difference. The thing that attracted me about it was they used a word called disruptive. It's disruptive in the triathlon world. And one of the descriptions of Barefoot Science as a product is it's disruptive technology. It's new, it's different, and it's changing the way that people perceive a particular thing, or in this case, for The Rock, an event. So they have what they call the trilogy. So 3 triathlon events, each one incorporating a mountain. So in the UK here, we've got the highest mountain is Ben Nevis in Scotland, and then the next is Snowdon in Wales, and the highest mountain in England is called Scafell Pike in the Lake District. So each of these triathlons involves a swim, an open water swim, sea or lake, a cycle of 50 kilometers to the foot of a mountain, then they run up whichever mountain it is and back down again, 12k in all, and then cycle back 50k, 30 miles, and then the one up in Wales for the Abersoch, it's called, place called Abersoch, they then had to do one just to finish off if they weren't already completely shot to pieces.
Sorry, hold on. So this is like 2 marathons in one? Is that kind of what you're telling me?
No. It's so in running terms, it's just only 12 kilometers, but it just so happens to be you have to run up a mountain and back down again. You cycle 30 miles or 50 kilometers each way to the foot of the mountain and back from the foot of the mountain to the beach or to the lake where you've done the swim.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
right.
swim.
So all the distances are still the same, but it's kind of like each leg, you kind of go all the way there and then all the way back.
Exactly. And then the mountain is thrown in the middle. So it's pretty tough. And it's got a, really sort of committed following. They've got a great following on their social media channels. So we decided, as Barefoot Science decided, to sponsor them and become a brand partner to the event. And I went up to the first one in Wales and spent 11 hours on a beach, luckily in beautiful sunshine. And because it's not usually the case on a beach in Wales, no. And it was great. These competitors were phenomenal. I mean, they were the fastest. People came in about 4.5 hours, and there were still people coming in 8.5 hours. But incredibly, there was only, I think, sadly, one person who didn't finish. He had a problem in the water, but everybody else finished. Then they have a chill out on the beach. So we got to speak to a few people, and we'll be doing stuff with them, doing some webinars for them and presenting.
Triathletes and like endurance athletes and stuff, they're just like cut from such a different cloth. Like, Stuart, have you ever want it? Like, even if you could, have you ever like wanted to do like, you know, be like, oh, half marathon's coming up, Stuart, let's like do a half marathon, or you know?
I got to tell you, Katie, I've got no desire to do that at all. I used to have to run. I loved I mean, I enjoyed running, so loved running. I enjoyed running as part of the training for whatever else I was doing. And pre-season training when I was playing football wasn't as scientifically structured as it is now. We just ran, and we ran up and down hills, and we ran along sandy tracks, and we, you know, interspersed with some bursts of sprinting. But largely, we ran, and we then ran, and we ran a bit more. But there was a purpose to it for me, and the purpose was to get fit for the particular sport for the season. And I struggle to get the motivation to go out running without that end purpose. So my running these days is restricted to a little trot every now and again with my dogs. I go out walking every day with my dogs, and I've done quite a lot of long distance walks. But if they're got a nice open space in front of us, I'll suddenly go, yeah, come on, let's go for it. And I'll just run along. I did do something called canine cross, which is where you actually run attached to your dog by a harness, and it's kind of mush, and away you go. And that was with my 38 kilo beast of a dog who towed me up this hill. And there's a bit of bungee in the lead that connects you, and it kind of get going to its full extent, and then it was boing, and I get sort of pinged back up the hill after him. And it was all going really, really well until we reached a tree, and he decided to veer off and went one side of the tree, and I went the other. And we met round the other side of it, and I looked at him and went, stay? But he didn't. And oh goodness, it was hilarious. So yeah, I do run, but I've got no desire to do a marathon. I treat loads and loads of marathon runners and ultra runners. And I had a guy last year, he did 25 marathons in 25 days through November to raise money for a military veterans charity. He was again a veteran himself, with a military cross and all sorts. This year he's doing 34 in 34 days. You know, I met a guy years ago who is not an elite athlete, but he goes all over the world. I don't know how old he is now. He was nearly 28 years ago when I first met him. I think he was in his 60s then. And he was traveling all over the world to run in events. And he'd done something like, he told me that he had a hamstring strain. And he'd, in the previous 12 months, run, I think it was something like 250 races, ranging from 5K on a track in the summer to marathons, cross country, trail runs, you know, astonishing. And I still see him occasionally beating a trail. Doesn't live too far away from me, and he doesn't drive anywhere. So he would run to the railway station, catch a train to say a half marathon along the seafront in Portsmouth, do the half marathon, look at his watch, realize if he ran to the station, he could get the train back. So he'd then just grab his bags and run. And one day he did that, and he pulled a calf muscle jumping onto the train to get the train home. So he phoned me the next day and said, oh, any chance of a treatment? I've strained my calf muscle. And I said, oh, you did the Portsmouth half marathon, didn't you? He said, they call it the Great South Run. He went, yeah. He said, but it wasn't doing the marathon, the half marathon. It was jumping up onto the train. So these people are wonderful, but I think half of them are stark staring bonkers. And they've got to be that little bit sort of compulsive about what they do. You know, I've got so many stories that we could keep going all day, but we probably better not. But I've got the greatest admiration for people that do these things.
Same thing, you know, like Stuart, you could just have one whole show yourself and hearing all your people who you treated and your adventures and you know,
that'd be quite fun. Yeah, I'm trying to get one of my closest friends who's been a client of mine for 29 years to come on. He tried to do the London Marathon about 6 times, and he kept getting injured every time. And I finally made him do the gait assessment. This guy's a workaholic, compulsive, obsessive, self-confessed, best-selling author, one of the world's leading veterinary surgeons, and he just hasn't got the time or the space in his life to revise his running style a little bit. And he keeps getting injured. And he did actually finish the London Marathon last year in about 5.5 hours or something. And he was dragging one leg across the finishing line. And, you know, and I, again, come on, embrace technology, embrace the use of these technologies to anyway. But yeah, so I could do a whole series about him actually. But yeah, loads and loads of stories. Anyway,
that's just it. These endurance athletes, the beatings that they take in finishing these races and stuff. I just wow.
But it's what's fascinating, and I'd love to get this guy on as a guest of ours. I did put his name as a suggestion. It's Chris McDougall, the guy who wrote Born to Run, which was sort of become an iconic book for the endurance athletes, who went and studied the way a tribe in an Indian tribe in Mexico run. And these guys in this tribe just run. That's their one sport, their one activity, their game. And they'll think nothing of running 30 miles to go and meet a friend to have a corn beer and then run back afterwards. And what he discovered was that they barely ever get injured. And they run either barefoot or with a thin sort of rubber sole that they just make from burnt out tires and things, car tires that they find. And they just strap it on and away they go. And so that set off that whole barefoot running world. And that's a really fascinating area, which I'm hoping we're going to touch on with various guests about whether, the title of our podcast is Born to Be Barefoot. Well, we were born to be barefoot, but is it relevant in the modern world? Is it the right thing for everybody to do? And I think we're going to get some different views. So I'm not going to give mine at the moment. I'm going to wait and chat with people who are experts in their fields, and we'll just compare notes, because I think that's such a topical area for runners, is whether they should go for minimal shoes, whether they should stay in traditional shoes, which have the 8 to 12 mil drop from heel to toe, or should they go for wide toe box? There's this whole area in the running industry, the running shoe industry. I was really disappointed actually. Today, I should have been heading off up to a conference where I was sitting on a panel to do with foot health. They're called the Running Industry Alliance. It's a new organisation that was formed this year here in the UK. There's a version of it in the States called, I think, the Running Industry Association. So it's an umbrella organisation for the whole of the running industry. And there were going to be an opportunity there to network and meet and chat with these people, from the big shoe manufacturers to the minimal shoe people to running coaches to athletics organisations, UK Athletics, and people like me and lots of other therapists and running coaches. And it would have been fascinating to get that. But unfortunately, as I'm sure many people know, our Queen sadly passed away, which is obviously very sad. And lots of these events have been cancelled. So that's one that's going to be postponed until December. So I'm not sure when our podcasts are going and how long they're going to be going for, but I'm hoping to get a load of find a few interesting people up there for maybe podcast series number 2, and get them on and talk about running over here and worldwide. So that'll be good. Yeah.
Yes, it will be. We'll make it that long. I'm pretty sure we'll make it that long, Stuart.
Maybe I'll get you here, Katie. If you
we don't stuck that bad.
Yeah. From what I gather, you're pretty good on a trade stand as well. There's a rumor going around that you were the main attraction when you started helping Barefoot Science out on a few events. So I might have to get you to stop on your way from New Zealand to Canada, go the wrong way around and come via UK, and I'll kidnap you.
Via UK. It's only 30 hours, Katie. Don't worry about it. You'll be good.
Tish. And
that's on a smooth travel too.
So anyway, we're gonna have a lot of fun, and as I say, hopefully you'll wake up, and hopefully I'll still be awake, and hopefully our guests.
You'll have your wine. You'll have your wine, and I'll have a cup of tea.
Yeah. I think
evening,
that's
early
only
morning.
reasonable. Yeah, and
seems civilized.
It's going to be informal. I don't think between us we can manage to do a formal interview. And if your young 2-year-old happens to interrupt us, so be it. If my dogs come in barking because they've seen a pigeon in the garden, I'll apologize, but life will go on and the interview will go on. So it's going to be real.
Yes, it's going to be real. Yeah. Real stories, real people, real hosts.
Yep. Good stuff.
You've been listening to the Born to Be Barefoot podcast with myself, Katie Tsuyuki, and the wonderful Stuart Gordon. Please remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star review. We'll see you guys next week.